happens.
Okay.
All right, gang, we're back. We'll try this again.
Thank you.
Wendy's on there.
Yeah, Wendy's on.
Thanks.
All right. So ironically, this week, it just worked out this way. It wasn't planned for us to be looking at crucifixion on Sunday, but that's just the way it works out sometimes. So this week, we're taking a look at Matthew chapter 27. 27. And often our first response, it says, often our first response to pain is to run from it, deny what we feel, thinking somehow that life is supposed to be easy, smooth, and comfortable. In his book, The Road Less Traveled, Scott Peck opens up new levels of personal growth for many by challenging his readers to admit life is difficult. Peck goes on to say that most emotional disorders come from the illegitimate avoidance of suffering. Because Jesus taught, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted," Christians can say honestly, facing and feeling our grief is the best way through it. And one of the first questions that we're asked is, in what specific ways might helping a person mourn in the midst of pain be a better approach than telling someone to cheer up or keep a stiff upper lip? So how might it actually help to not turn somebody away from the pain, but actually be with them in it? Hey, good morning.
Hi, sorry we're late.
That's okay. That's okay.
Glad
Hard
you're
to-
here.
It's hard to juggle everything, isn't it?
A little bit, a little bit. Well, and Randy's a lot to manage.
Oh, my.
Is that the truth? How are you?
Good morning,
today?
Randy.
Hi, thank you. My mother
I was gonna
Nancy.
say, hi, I'm Randy Brown. Nice to have you here today.
Nancy Joyce Brown.
Randy and Joyce. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, nice to meet you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Terry,
That's okay. That's okay.
Oh, we're here.
Knowledge of the Bible.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see
today.
you too.
Keeps Brad on his toes.
All the time.
Randy keeps Brad on me.
Keeps me honest.
There you go.
I do have a question for you.
I knew
Oh,
you would.
knew that.
I knew that.
Since we've talked a lot, and I mentioned the thing earlier about Caiaphas,
Uh-huh.
you know, I was thinking this morning, you know, as intelligent as some of these people were, he had to be a brilliant guy. He wouldn't have been in the position for that.
Yeah.
And yet, and I'm sure that after the crucifixion, he probably did his diligence to find out how did all this take place, whether he believed it or not.
Sure.
And I was wondering, do we have any record of what happened to him after?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, probably we do. Because the sort of list of all the leadership, the temple leadership,
Hey, baby girl.
you track it from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. So probably, I don't know. I've never read on that. I've never studied about that, but yeah, probably.
You just wonder because those people had to do all kinds of looking into this after it happened.
Oh, sure. I mean, we know for certain that the leadership basically, starts to try to purge, this sect of Judaism, Christianity. They try to purge it after Jesus's death. We see that throughout the Acts of the Apostles, right? And we have other independent sources, historical sources, that say this was going on as well. So it's not just in the Gospels. It's not just in the New Testament that we hear about, right, leadership within Judaism trying to purge Christianity. There's also independent sources, other historians of the time that talk about it.
There was one other question, that this is my personal one.
Okay.
You mentioned a number of times about the gentleman that you met on the plane. That was
Oh, yeah.
a brilliant guy.
Yes.
Okay. Very much a student of the New Testament.
Mhm.
Did he not believe?
That was one of the big questions on my mind. And I think it's fair to say that he would be skeptical that Jesus is the Messiah. But he was also skeptical of the idea that he was just a popular figure, right? He saw a lot of wisdom in the teaching. He saw a lot of wisdom in the interpretation, Jesus' interpretation of the scriptures. So I think he would describe himself as being willing to learn from, but not at the place where he would say, yes, he was the Messiah. Yeah, for sure. We love questions around here. So the original question that I was asking right when you guys walked in was, it's largely about people in mourning, people in the midst of pain, because of course, when we're looking at this passage from Matthew 27, it's all about the crucifixion. It's all about people being in pain and in mourning. And the question is, in what specific ways might helping a person mourn in the midst of their pain be a better approach than telling someone to cheer up or to keep a stiff upper lip, or my personal favorite, suck it up, buttercup, right?
Because when the morning takes place, okay, but there are times when you may be mourning right in the middle of a very difficult situation.
Yes.
And other times you may not mourn till afterwards.
Yes.
And, I don't think we know how we will function in those kind of situations until they are happens.
And how do we help people in the midst of that? When I see someone mourning, what can you do? What?
Just be present,
Okay.
emotionally ready and present.
Okay.
You can use
Going
your,
through that now.
That's why, yeah, that's what I've been doing. I'm just there for her, you know. It goes in waves.
you can use your own experience. Sometimes,
Sure.
oh, you have your moment. Be able to help someone else who maybe needs to think about it.
Be a good listener to them.
That's probably the biggest thing.
Listen.
Yeah. I mean, there's something really to that. I mean, mourning is painful. It's part of sadness, but every emotion has a message for us. Every emotion's trying to tell us something. And sadness is trying to tell us about loss. Sadness is trying to point out to us, you have lost something that's important to you. What does that mean? Oh.
There.
Okay. Bet you we're muted. Oh no, we're not. Okay. So as I was saying, like, pain of mourning and loss is trying to point out you've lost something important. What are you going to do about it? Right? When you lose your car keys, do you need to know that? Is it a pleasant feeling? No, it's not, but you need to know it, right? And in this case, they're trying to make sense of, in their mourning, what comes next? What comes next?
Didn't Jesus tell them that he told them what was gonna come next?
Yes. And
You'll see me again.
yes,
I'll be back,
yes,
right?
yes. And
I think they have to I think there has to be a little time and step away and then you see it, you realize that Christ did for them. And they
Wasn't
have to
Christ,
find again.
wasn't Christ mourning? when he was looking for God to intercede for him, and he didn't. I would think he was, that was when there was sort of a separation, which he comes back and puts together everything later, but there was definitely a separation there. I would think he would have been mourning at that time.
Okay, we're headed towards question number 4. We are totally headed right at so, you know, tell you what, we're just gonna read this to really get into it. So, when morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, and he said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they're blood money. After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price. So he's being very specific. Being very specific there about who set this price. And they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord commanded. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, you say so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many accusations they make against you? But he gave him no answer, not even a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now, at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, who do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, have nothing to do with that innocent man. For today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then, what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? All of them said, let him be crucified. Then he asked them, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. Then the people as a whole answered, his blood will be on us and on our children. So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross, and when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right, one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him. Now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. So, I mean, do you see the sort of flow of this thing, right? More and more people abandoning Jesus, right? The disciples, the people, justice, even justice abandons Jesus in this moment, right? The soldiers gather around and mock him. The people walking past even mock him. Everybody is turning their backs on Jesus. Everybody, it's universal. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And at about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which is basically, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some of the bystanders heard it, and they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." And at once, one of them ran and got a sponge and filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks were split, the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what an impostor said while he was still alive, that impostor. 'After 3 days I will rise again.' Therefore command the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first. Jesus said to him, you have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can. So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. What's it like to just listen to this? Just to hear this? What do you feel when you hear this story?
Sadness.
What about it draws out the sadness for you?
Well, it's because after 3 years of really doing such wonderful things
Mhm.
and leading these people to really look forward to something that they hadn't looked for all their lives, and all of a sudden, for them it's all that.
Yeah, in a sense, kind of what stands out to me is all the different people that have kind of been watching and waiting to see Jesus do something. Watching, I mean, the women who followed him all the way from Galilee. They followed him all the way from Galilee, these women. That's not necessarily a safe sort of trip, is it? Right? Think about that. And they're watching and they're waiting from a distance to see what's going to happen here, expecting something, right? They followed him all the way to Jerusalem. That's a gutsy thing to do, expecting something to happen. And then it doesn't, or at least not the way they think it's going to. And then even the earth shows mourning, right? What sorts of things happen? Earthquake and darkness, right? Earthquake and darkness. Temple curtain rips in two. What's the significance of that, by the way? Why is Matthew telling us that?
That's just saying that not Jews people access to God, access to Christ. God split the curtain, and that was what was between the people and God, was the curtain. And the curtain was split. That meant that they were open.
Yeah, this Holy of Holies, right? The Holy of Holies, where the presence of God abides with the people, right? There's a real statement in that temple curtain being ripped, right? And this way in which God is present with the people is fundamentally changed, right? It's both a promise, but it's also a conviction, right? It's a promise, but it's also a conviction. He's tearing it apart. So, what are some of the ways and by whom is Jesus mocked, right? He's mocked by many different people. What are some of the ways?
Soldiers mocked him by spitting on him and treating him. The one thing that the soldiers doesn't, said here is the fact that when they offered him the drink with gall, that was really an antidote to cut down on the pain. But it doesn't, because that's why they offered it to him. But he denied to take it, but that's what they were offering it to him for.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, they're offering Jesus. That's what, yeah, you're right. The gall is basically to blunt the pain, right? And kind of like an anesthetic. But he refuses it. He refuses to diminish the pain. He refuses. Yeah, the soldiers dress him up like a pretend king and mock him. Who else mocks him?
Leading priests, the teachers of the law, older Jewish leaders, and the governor's soldiers.
Right? Everybody who basically is challenging his claim is mocking him and basically saying, all right, big shot. Let's see it. Come on. What do you got? It'd be kind of like, it'd be similar to, you know, it'd be similar to, when the prophet calls down fire. Remember the big contest, right? Between the prophets of Baal and Elijah. And they basically, it's the sort of, I don't know, face off, basically saying whose God is real, Baal or Yahweh, right? And the prophets of Baal do their whole thing and nothing really happens. And then what does Elijah do? Yeah, he basically creates this offering, and instead of putting things on it that are going to make it light, he puts water on it to make sure that, like, okay, everybody agrees this is impossible at this point. And then calls down fire. Right? Asks God to send fire to prove God is God. And in a very real sense, right? We've got a similar contest going on right now. Who is God really? Right? And it doesn't look like it's Jesus. It sure doesn't look like it's Jesus. To them. I was talking to John this morning and talking about the New Testament. Oftentimes people will say basically, why do we need any of the Old Testament if we've got the New Testament? I mean, the Old Testament is in so many ways just troublesome to read, number one, and number two, like, where's the good news in that?
A lot of good news in the Old Testament.
Agreed, right?
Yeah.
Well,
The
You-
prophecies we get out of the,
and prophecies, yes. And I mean, Jesus, the teaching that people find that's so transformative from Jesus, what's Jesus teaching about? The scriptures. What are they talking about? The Old Testament, right? Jesus is basically showing them the good news that's there. That's there. You need the Old Testament to understand the New. Just about everything Jesus says is a quote from the Old Testament, right? Yeah.
So it just shows how right on target God has always been.
Yes. So, there's this part that you mentioned, Randy. As death begins to engulf him, Jesus cries out to God. What do his cry and the overshadowing darkness reveal about his relationship to the Father during this torment?
He's absent.
Let's take a look. Right? So verses 45 and 46. So, from noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. Noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. Do folks remember? Do folks remember in the creation story, right? In the creation story, what does God do with light and darkness?
Is it a day and a night?
Yeah. And basically, he gives, he gives light. God brings light into the world, right? Light to make things grow, light to help us to be able to see and interact with the world around us, right? John will even call Jesus the light that came into the world, right? Light and darkness, pretty important. Matthew's going to use light and darkness. Darkness in Matthew and also in John. Bad things happen in the dark. Yes? Bad things happen in the dark. And so from noon until 3 in the afternoon, right? The darkness. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, we've got this darkness. So what were you saying about that?
Said the father was absent.
Yeah, there's this sense of even disconnection, even from the light. Right? I'm letting this darkness enfold everyone. The darkness of everybody's actions. Right? The darkness of sin and death gets to come.
That's when it gets dark sometimes. I remember I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9. And there was a large forest fire in Canada.
Okay.
And it turned everything dark here for most of the day. This was a long time ago, but I thought that was it
Sure.
because of the darkness. And I thought, this is the day. I felt very uncomfortable with that. But it's again, it's the thing of the darkness and it comes from there. The dark.
Yes.
It was frightening.
Oh, it is. It is frightening. Or if you've ever been in a real cave. Has anybody ever been in a real cave?
Yeah.
And they turn out the lights and you can hold your hand like right here and see nothing. It is a bewildering feeling. It's a bewildering feeling. You really would be hard pressed to find your way in darkness like that. And now we've got this kind of darkness. And Jesus crying out with a loud voice, right? This is a prolonged darkness, right? This is Jesus in a prolonged darkness, feeling that separation from the Father, that final separation. Everybody else, and now the one that matters the most. My God, why have you forsaken me? It's poignant. Right? Was it necessary then for Jesus to feel that God had forsaken him? Was it necessary for Jesus to feel that God had forsaken him? Yes.
Well, that's showing that he was still the humanness of him. He was both man and God. That was the man part of him, showing that. That's what was for him. Because mankind would think that you forsaken him.
He has to suffer, right? He has to. Go ahead.
Yes, because he gave Jesus the consequence that we all deserve. And God was laying the consequences of all of our iniquity upon his son, Jesus Christ. And you actually find that in Isaiah 53 from the Old Testament.
Mhm.
If I just read 2 verses, you
Yes.
can understand. It says, Isaiah 4, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Sounds a lot like Jesus dying on the cross.
That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You know, one way of sort of thinking about this is, for this healing in the relationship to take place between God and humankind, right? You got to deal with the wound. You got to fully deal with the wound. And so Jesus has to basically take that wound on. It can't just be a little slap on the knee. It's got to be the full weight of the wound. He's got to take it on in order to heal it. Every last bit of it. Because that's what it would be for us without the sacrifice. That's what it would be between us and God. A sort of gulf, a sort of separation that can't be overcome. That's essentially the message of the center of your Bibles, right? From Job through Isaiah. Human beings cannot be in right relationship with God. We'll screw it up again and again and again. We just will. We'll screw it up again and again and again. And so by the time we get to Isaiah, we kind of have learned that, right? The Psalms talk about all the different circumstances of our relationship with God, right? And Ecclesiastes basically talks about all the different sort of philosophical questions we have about life and what it all means. And Song of Solomon, right? Song of Solomon sort of points to the loving relationship that God would have with us. And yet we can't quite get there. And so Isaiah points out what God is going to do about that. That's why that flow. Isaiah is basically saying, after all these books that sort of show the human situation and how much we need saving, Isaiah is going to tell us what it's going to look like. Does that make sense? It's there in the Old Testament. It's there. Yeah.
That's a question I had.
Yeah.
When he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? There's one word in that sentence that is questioning it. Why doesn't he say, my God, you have forsaken me? Why does he question it? Is it rhetorical? Does he know what's going on, or doesn't he? Do you think? I don't know. Like,
No, it's super good question.
I think he knows what's going on, but it's more like a rhetorical. I don't know.
Is he saying this? So if it's rhetorical, he's saying this out loud, why? If it's rhetorical, he's saying this so that people will hear it. That's the point of a rhetorical question. And learn what from it?
Kind of like the proof that he took our sins. He's yelling it so everyone hears the proof. Maybe.
Yeah, it may be a final moment of teaching.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's like, what's going on? I thought he was like the guy. What's going on here? This could be a final moment of teaching when Jesus is basically encouraging them to think about that for a second. Why is this happening? Why am I not getting down from the cross in the way that you expected me to? Why is this not turning out the way that you thought it should? Think about why that is. Do you all understand? Do you finally understand that this is the way it has to be?
Or is he preparing them for the big day?
Yes. Right? If I think about why, that prepares us for what?
Resurrection,
Yes.
which is the most unbelievable thing that's happened in the history of mankind. The most one single thing in the history of mankind. But every time.
Yes. In order for change to happen, there also has to be loss. right? In order for change to happen, there has to be loss.
Why?
Ah,
Mhm.
think about it.
What would you need to change if you didn't know, if you hadn't lost something? Okay, if you haven't had something, you know, why look to change it then? Why look for change? You're satisfied with what you got. But if you've lost and you're in a thing where you've lost something, you're looking to have something replaced.
Well, and whatever was before, whatever things were before is now lost. Because there's change. Right? When we, for instance, when we have children that mature and grow, yes? There's loss involved in that too, isn't there?
But in the history of mankind, even since okay, there are many situations where people have lost, and instead of gaining something from it, they've lost even more in the second time around. The history of the Polish people is a good example of that. And if you remember, I couldn't even finish Michener's Poland because I knew what was going to happen. Because it was just from one loss to another loss to another.
Mhm.
And that happens sometimes.
It does happen sometimes, right? But this is a key loss. This is a key loss. Why?
Well, for the Jews, all hope was lost. After this. If you were there at the time, that was the ultimate loss. They had lost everything they were looking forward to. So it was the ultimate despair for them, I would think.
Okay. Yeah. I thought it was really going to happen this time, and no. So the centurion, I mean, we could spend all day on some of this, right? But if what Jesus is really saying there is basically think about why it has to be this way. And also, if you're going to think about that, think what I said comes after that. Right? He's also inviting them back to Isaiah with that statement. Right? The words that he chooses should ring a bell in their head about the prophecy from Isaiah. He's inviting them to think of that. So, as the centurion witnesses the strange events surrounding Jesus' death, he exclaims, "Surely he was the Son of God." Surely he was the Son of God. Why does he say that? What sort of clues do we have?
The graves opening, the earth shaking, and the curtain split.
Right? Why does Matthew include these kind of details? I mean, other than they're pretty amazing. These are it's a pattern. These kind of details are a pattern of a particular type of story. Sort of like once upon a time in a land far, far away. What kind of story am I getting ready to tell?
Fairy tale.
Fairy tale, right? How do you know? I haven't told the story yet. How do you know?
That's the pattern of fairy tale.
That's the pattern of a fairy tale. This pattern is a pattern that we call apocalypse. Apocalypse. And in apocalypse, it's a story in which the people that are on the bottom are going to be put on top. And the people that are on top are going to be put on the bottom. And there's going to be all kinds of signs and symbols that kind of change is happening. That kind of regime change is happening. Some of which you'll get are earthquakes, darkness, day turning into night. You will have the dead coming out of their graves. You'll have angelic characters showing up, right? All of these sorts of things are very much. So Matthew includes these. Matthew includes these so that we can recognize the pattern too. And begin to give some insight into like this part where we oftentimes don't. I have almost never heard anybody talk about this part. The earth shook, the rocks were split, the tombs also were opened. Many of the bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Anybody ever preach on that one?
No,
I didn't
know your thoughts on it.
I never thought of it until I just read it.
No, I read it over the week and I was like, there's gotta be some significance to that verse. I just don't know what it is.
You know, I was thinking, I'm like, what is this?
And I mean, in the very realist sense, the dead are raised, but Matthew says it this way, right? The tombs also were opened. Many of the bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs. They don't leave the tombs before his resurrection. They don't leave the tombs before after his resurrection, right? Mm-hmm. And then what do? They enter the holy city and appeared to many.
Guess who I saw downtown yesterday?
That's way.
I just saw Bill. You won't believe it, but I just saw him.
Those graves and those saints, what's coming next?
Jerusalem?
Huh?
Would say Jerusalem or something?
Well, they're going into Jerusalem, but those people are raised. Jesus is going to be raised.
Right.
Go back to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You got to read it. You just got to read it. It gets this part just right. Aslan goes into basically the witch's castle where everybody's been turned to stone, and he starts breathing on them all. Breathing on them all, and they come back to life again. That's Lewis doing this right here. You got to read it. It's powerful stuff. Okay. Obviously, we're not going to make it all the way through this chapter this week. Shocker. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up next week. I want to make sure we get upstairs so folks can, have a place to sit. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for cluing us into what comes next. That he is risen. And we are risen with him. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you, Brad.
You're boy. Quite powerful.
That's
Really makes you think.
that's Bible study for you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
That's Bible study for you. Good for the soul.
Not like your other Bible studies you've been to, huh, Mom?